Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Another set of sales has graced us in War Thunder, and this day it's for the National Day of the PRC. So it's a bunch of discounts for Chinese vehicles. We have the Al-Khalid, which is 50% off, the J7D, which is 50% off, and they're also bringing back some other vehicles for sale, the Type 69-2A and also the T62 number 545. And there are a few other vehicles which are also on discount, the T69-2G, the A5C, Z19E, the WAMA 301, and also the ZTZ96AP. So what we'll do is we'll do little reviews of all of those vehicles. There's also a decal on offer which you can get. It's the National Day of the People's Republic of China 2025 decal. It has some little bunny rabbits on it. Pretty cute. All you have to do is grind 3,000 mission points in battles where you use Chinese vehicles at rank 3 or higher, and you can get it done. This is available from the 1st of October until the 8th of October, so you have plenty of time in order to do it. So let's get into the vehicle reviews, and as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe and also like the video. So the first vehicle we're having a look at is the Al-Khalid-I. Now, by the way, if you want to purchase any of these things, I'll leave links in the description to the packs, and then obviously we have the G vehicles as well. So with the Al-Khalid, what this is very similar to the MBT 2000, which you'll find in the tech tree. They're both of the same BR, and they're both basically of equal use. There's slight differences in terms of armor, but it doesn't make a huge difference to the vehicle. What you're getting out of the Al-Khalid is a very, very nice MBT. What you have is the 125mm. It also has access to the DTC 10-125. This is the best round that China gets. Used to get 11.0, but they actually put this thing up in BR to 11.3 because it was so strong. And then also you get a funny HEVT shell. You also get decent thermals, the laser rangefinder, and then obviously the smokes too. So your general kind of weaponry that you have is fantastic. The only problem with it is, as you can see, the vertical drive on the gun is a little bit rough. So sometimes getting the gun on the target can be a little bit annoying. But one of the things that's really cool about this vehicle compared to many other Chinese or even Russian vehicles is the fact that it has a very powerful transmission. So you go forward very quick, but also you can see you go backwards very quick. And this means that you can rotate the vehicle very effectively and at the same time get out of dodge if you need to. It still has the 7.1 second reload and has all the standard features of these types of Russian-style vehicles with the autoloader and then also all of the fuel tanks which eat shells as they feel like it. But generally, I would say the Al-Khalid is actually very fun to play. I've had a great time in it whenever I've played it, even getting a nuke in it without really even trying. Nowadays, though, at 11.3, it's a little bit more balanced compared to what it was before, so it's not as strong as it used to be, but it's still very, very good. The next vehicle we're having a look at is the WMA 301. This is a fun little light tank. Well, I shouldn't call it little, it's massive, but it kind of follows the trend of a lot of light tanks around this BR, where they're more light tank based on their armor instead of their general size. The WMA is a wheeled vehicle, which means on some terrains it's quite mobile and on others it struggles, but the main reason you use this thing is not necessarily for its kind of armor profile or its mobility on, bad surfaces. It's because it has a very powerful gun for what it has, and also has access to some weird and wonderful ammunition for it. So this vehicle has access to APF SDS, which will pen pretty much anything that you run into. It also has access to a tandem warhead ATGM if you want to use that from range. It does get a HEVT too, because why not? And then also it gets the heat, and then also the SABCBC and the HESH. So this gun basically just has all the different shells that you would want out of this type of vehicle. Another thing this also has is a laser rangefinder and really, really good thermals. So as a platform to be able to use this gun, it actually works really well. So for me, I think the WMA 301 actually is really fun. The major issue with the WMA, it's just like the issue with the Al-Khalid, where it just kept going up in BR over and over again, and that kind of made it a little bit harder to use. But the thing is, nowadays, if you have a look at the actual kind of BR around it. So the lineup that you can get, it's incredibly strong. You have the ZTZ88s, you have the M60, you have the PGZ09, which is incredibly powerful. You have both of these guys, the PTL02, which is just a worse version of the WMA, and then also you have the AFT09 plus the PTC89, which probably shouldn't be this BR. But you have all of this huge lineup. So you can use this vehicle in many different ways, and then you can back it up with all of the other stuff that you can bring in. It's kind of crazy, actually, how useful this thing can be. The next vehicle on offer is the T69 2G, and this is kind of in a similar situation to the WMA 301. I would say that this is in a slightly worse position, though, just because the ZTZ88s exist, and they are a little bit more powerful than this thing. So the T69 2G, it has the 105mm ZPL 94. This gives it access to the Type 83 APDS again, or the APF-SDS. Also gets the laser rangefinder, which is nice, and all of those cool things. But the major problem with this is its targeting speed is pretty low for the area. You'll get out-targeted by pretty much everything. And then also, it just doesn't really have a great transmission, meaning that going backwards isn't really something that it can do. Now, if you compare it to the ZTZ88s, which you'll find here, right? So they have the 105s too. This one has the ZPL 94. It has the Type 83 APDS and the laser rangefinder. It literally has exactly the same kind of setup as it. The difference is that this vehicle, instead of getting the ERA on top of it, the chemical protection, it gets a piece of composite armor, which what ends up happening is people end up shooting this thing and going, wow, how the hell did that not go through? And it's literally because it has this rolled homogeneous 100mm, a 20mm on top, and then also the composite armor underneath. There's no like real protection on the turret apart from the variable thickness, but that's why sometimes people will just kind of get screwed by it. And on this vehicle, you have the ERA and you have the plate underneath the 100mm, but you don't have any of the actual kind of composite armor underneath, so it's much easier to pen through the upper glacis. Now, this thing still has that ridiculously large fuel tank that eats everything. You can see they've actually made it into different parts now. So what can actually happen is this part can absorb around, and then this part can absorb around, and then this part can absorb around. So yeah, it's just pretty nuts in terms of survivability. But at the end of the day, when you're getting a premium vehicle, you want it to be at least comparable to what's in the tech tree. And for me, I would say the ones in the tech tree are slightly better, but these are still very usable. It's another vehicle, once again, that went up in BR a bunch of times because it's really powerful. And it's still at a good BR because it has a really good lineup around it. It's just not as powerful as it used to be, and that is a little bit of a problem. T62 is back once again. I feel like they bring this back pretty much every single time. The T62 number 545 is just a T62. It's just the one in the Russian tech tree. Has an interesting story behind it in terms of history, in terms of how China got access to it, capturing it in one of the scuffles with the Russians. But yeah, it's got a set of stuff to it which is slightly different from what you'll find from other nations. Has a little bit of a longer reload than the standard 105 reload that you'll find, but it also has the 115mm U5 TS, which is kind of interesting because you have the 3BM4 and the 3BM3. One has more angled pen and the other one has more flat pen. So depending on what you're facing, it's actually better to take either round. But the problem is you don't know what you're going to be facing until you face it. So it can be a little bit rough in terms of that. The other thing is it's at 8.7 and there's a lot of nations with some pretty powerful 9.3s nowadays. Not as powerful as they used to be though. The last set of BR changes definitely helped in terms of that, so hopefully this thing will actually feel itself a little bit better. But yeah, the long reload can catch people out quite a lot, but for me, I actually really enjoy the T62. I think it's super fun to actually use, basically because of the fact that it's got a very low profile, it's got wonky armor, especially now that it has the variable thickness armor, and then also it's very hard to one-shot because you either hit it here and only hit the loader, or you hit it here and hit the commander and the gunner, and you still survive because there's no actual ammo in the top. It's all first stage down here. So unless you get a really good shot on the upper glacis hitting the driver, the gunner, and also the commander, It's very hard to kill this thing in one hit, and that makes it super fun to play because you can trade very effectively with it. It's also just slightly different, and for me, I think slightly different stuff is actually a bit of fun. So I'm glad that this is on offer. I'm glad that they brought this back, and I would recommend this because I've never had a bad time in a T62. They've always just been fun and also just a little bit of variety compared to the more standard Russian vehicles you play or more standard, kind of Western vehicles you play. Next vehicle is the ZTZ96AP. This is pretty much exactly the same as the standard ZTZ96A that you find in the tech tree, apart from it gets this, the electro-optical actuator protection system, which is the JD3. This doesn't really do anything against anything you're going to fight, so it's just kind of window dressing. But the ZTZ96 gets some interesting stuff. So a lot of people compare it to the T72. It's got the same reload, it's kind of got the same setup in terms of its autoloader, and also it has that kind of newly modeled autoloader too, plus the FCS, which they haven't fully brought in yet. But basically, the 96A has, the same reload, but it has a really good APF SDS in the Type 1985-1 APF SDS, and then also it gets really good thermals on the gunner, which is super nice at 10.3. Not something that you always get with vehicles. Usually, most vehicles are running with Gen 1s, whereas the 96A runs with a higher thing. And then you also get the laser rangefinder to help you out. And you get the pretty standard targeting speed of this thing, which is slightly better than the Russian vehicles. So the ZTZ96 has either equivalent or slightly better armament because of the round. It also has access to slightly better targeting speed, but the problem is it gets slightly worse armor. And that's kind of annoying, but not a huge deal because once again, you do still have the fuel tanks, you do still have all of the little things that eat rounds randomly, and also you can't get out of dodge if you get in, but you are still better than the Russian vehicles, which get into dodge a little bit harder. So for me, I actually think the ZTZ's really nice to play. I've played it quite a lot, the standard one and then also the premium one. And also, played a lot of like the other MBTs around this area, not just from China, but from others too. And I'd say it fits really well. You basically just have a trade-off. You have slightly worse mobility, slightly worse targeting speed, but you have a really powerful gun, and also you can snipe from long ranges, and you have a pretty low profile. So in terms of like how it fits in the meta, I think it works really good at 10.3 right now, especially since they just moved up a bunch of monsters which are 11.3, mainly the Type 90. So now you just have to compete against stuff like the Abrams and the Leopard 2, and this thing does it very well because it has that very punchy round that can go through a lot of stuff. Another vehicle that's on offer is the Type 69-2A. This one has come back once again. They bring this back a while every so often. I feel like they dangle it in front of people to kind of like sell it. But you have the standard Type 69, right? Which is at 8.0. Then you have the Type 69-2A. Now, what's the difference between these two vehicles? There is actually quite a few differences between them, mainly when it comes to the gun stuff. So even though it's 100mm, it gets the APDS, it gets the Type 44 AP, and also it gets the heat FS. On this. When it comes to the Type 69, it has a heat FS, but it also has an APFS DS. And this APFS DS is probably the weakest, no, it's probably not the weakest. You have the M41, but it's a very weak APFS DS. So when I play the Type 69, I actually usually use the heat FS because you have the laser rangefinder in order to use that heat FS very effectively. But the Type 69-2A, with the different rounds that it has, basically you can choose which different ones that you want, and it actually works a lot better in terms of it than the Type 69. The problem is it is higher BR, so it's a little bit harder to play because of that, but I would generally say it's not a huge issue. You see that you have some other things that are quite nice on it, such as you have the smoke grenades, you have the slightly little bits of additional armor, which isn't really going to make a difference. The fuel tanks are really the nice thing about that. And then also you get this big 12.7 on the top, which can deal with light vehicles or protect you against stuff like helicopters, which is pretty cool. So the question you have to ask yourself is it worth on this thing having smoke grenades and having access to better rounds to be at an 8.3 BR instead of at 8.0, which the Type 69 is at? For me, I would say no. because if you compare the two lineups, 8.0 is in a very fantastic place. The WZ is really good as an AA. Then you have, of course, the 59 and the 69, which are nice. And then also you've got the Zibidi or the BMP. You can run that with, and also the M41 if you've got a Death Wish. But the 8.3 lineup is a lot worse in terms of it. All you really gain is the ZTZ59D1, which technically is just better than the Type 62, the Type 69 2A, sorry, because this one gets the 105mm Type 83, which has the better APF STS. So you are pretty much buying a backup to a vehicle which is on an island instead of playing vehicles which aren't on an island in a better lineup at a lower BR. So it's a tough sell for this one, it really is, and that is a bit of a problem. The J7D is on sale. This vehicle is overpowered and has been for a long time. It gets access to a ridiculous IR armament when it comes to the air portion. Obviously, this is an air superiority fighter. It's more MiG-21 than anything else. You don't want to bring this into ground. This is just an air realistic. I want to grind stuff and shoot it in the face. So you have access to the PL7s. These are the Magic Ones, some of the best IR missiles in the game. You also have the PL5Bs, which every so often just decide that flares don't exist. No idea why, but they just have a propensity just to break through flares and hit the general engines that they're going after. So yeah, you have really good missile combo. 4 Magics at 10.7 is disgracefully overpowered. And the fact that this vehicle has never gone up, especially when a bunch of other stuff has gone up, is insane. So yeah, there's not really much else to say about this. It is a very powerful engine, very good set of countermeasures, very good at the air superiority role. Highly recommend it if you kind of want to grind through the Chinese tech tree. Pretty much as simple as that. The next vehicle is the A5C, and it is hilarious that this vehicle is at the same BR as the J7D. It is slower. It has half the amount of missiles. It doesn't have as big or easy to turn. It's just, you know, kind of a brick in the air. Basically, what the A5C used to be was a magic launcher. So it has 2 magics on it, which, you know, is really nice. The good old magic R550s that you can see here. And then it has access to M9Ps, which you don't take because they're worse than the magics. And now you have access to some other kind of ordnance options, including some incendiaries, so you can destroy a base. How wonderful. And then also you have some heat rounds and also some other stuff that you can bring along. But basically, the reason why you play this thing is to hit a base and then use the magic wands to be able to destroy things. The problem is around these BRs is there's many vehicles that are faster than you, so getting to bases is not the easiest, so you're just stuck with using the magic wands, which is fine because they're very powerful. But guess what? The J7D is at the same BR, so just play the J7D. And this thing's use in ground battles, as you saw from the ordnance, it doesn't have great ordnance in order to be used in ground battles, so it just doesn't really work very well, even though it's 10-0 in ground battles, showing its lack of ordnance compared to other things. So the problem with the A5C is the J7D exists, and since they're at the same BR, there is absolutely no reason to use this thing. The last vehicle that is on offer is the Z19E. This one is actually, I think, kind of worth a pickup. Because getting through now to the higher tiers of the Chinese is a little bit harder to do because they've added a few vehicles in here. And then also at the same time, the Z10ME is looking incredibly powerful right now. Basically, what you're getting out of the Z19 is a lot of cool factors. You get thermals, which are attached to an insanely good optic. You can see it goes up to 81 times on the optic itself. And also you're getting access to the best, I think, air-to-air missiles for helicopters in the game. The TY-90s are specifically designed to kind of like dogfight in helicopters. So these are really, really good in terms of the game. And then also you get the blue arrows, which are right here. Now the blue arrows, this is basically the thing which kind of holds back the vehicle. How these are laser guided, so very similar to Hellfires. You have to keep the sight on the target, and then on top of it, what you have to do is you have to keep up with the range. It's only 6 kilometer firing range, where there's a lot of other things that have a much further kind of set up for its firing range, so that can be a bit of a problem. And also, the major issue is since you're at 11.3, you're going to get updated into 12.0 and 12.3, and that's where all those mega helicopters are. So if you actually play around your BR or lower, generally I would say you're actually in a pretty good place. The AAs that are on the ground are not exactly fantastic, and you have a very good RWR to detect what's coming in. But if you don't, and instead what ends up happening is you get to the higher BRs 12.0, which of course is top tier, which you'll get into quite a lot, you're just going to get eaten alive by the AAs there. And then also on top of it, you just have way better versions of yourself that exist. So basically, if you're running the 11.3 lineup with the Al-Khalid, this might be a nice CAS option to put into it because of the fact that there isn't a ton of CAS options for China around these BRs, but just understand in a lot of situations, it's just going to get popped out the air while you're trying to get your missiles on target. So that's all the vehicles that are on offer. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.